Didn't bury me. They just stopped counting me among the living. That's what I kept coming back to, in the months after everything collapsed. Not the betrayal itself, but how clean it felt to them. How easy. Like crossing a name off a list. My name is Avery. Avery Cole. And for 31 years, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, caused little enough trouble, my family would eventually see me. Really see me. I know how that sounds now. I know. My brother Liam was 2 years younger than me and about 40 years more beloved. That's not bitterness talking. It's just math. Growing up, our mother referred to him as our miracle because he'd had a heart condition as a baby that corrected itself by age 3. After that, he became the permanent center of every room we were ever in. Every holiday, every conversation, every resource our parents had, financial or emotional. Liam's college fund was fully funded before he turned 8. Mine was an afterthought, replenished in whatever was left over at the end of the month, which was usually nothing. My father wasn't cruel. He was just absent in the way that some men are absent even when they're physically present. Always agreeing with my mother, always deferring, always finding somewhere else to look when she directed her coldness at me. I loved him anyway. Maybe that's the saddest part. I left for college on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs. I studied accounting, not because I dreamed of accounting, but because I was good with numbers, and I understood, even at 18, that financial literacy was a form of armor. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving that first year. I told them I had to work, which was true. My mother called once to tell me Liam had started dating someone wonderful. She didn't ask how my classes were going. After graduation, I got hired as a staff auditor at a regional firm in Charlotte. I was good at the job. Better than good. I had a kind of instinct for irregularities, the way a musician hears a note that's barely off. 2 years in, I was poached by a mid-sized financial consulting firm downtown. 3 years after that, I had a reputation in certain circles for being someone you called when the numbers didn't add up and you needed to know why, before the regulators did. I built that. Quietly, without anyone's help, without anyone's approval. I built it brick by brick, while my family celebrated Liam's every mediocre milestone like it was a moon landing. What Liam had built, it turned out, was something else entirely. He'd started a real estate investment company 6 years ago, Sterling Oak Capital, which even now makes me want to laugh at the audacity of the name. My mother had given him $200,000 as seed money. I found out about this later, much later, money that came from refinancing the family home without telling my father. My father, who by that point had early-stage Parkinson's and trusted her to manage everything. Sterling Oak had attracted investors. Mostly retirees, mostly people who knew Liam socially, mostly people who trusted him because our mother introduced him as a young man with a gift. Some of them had put in their entire retirement savings. One woman had liquidated a $340,000 IRA to invest. She was 67 years old. It was a Ponzi scheme. Not a sophisticated one, that's almost the most offensive part. It was sloppy and arrogant and held together primarily by the fact that no one thought to look too closely at a charming young man whose mother vouched for him at church. I didn't know any of this when my phone rang on a Thursday in October. It was my mother. She called maybe 4 times a year, and each call followed a predictable script, Liam's recent accomplishments, a brief inquiry into whether I was seeing anyone, and a reminder that I should think about moving back home. This call started the same way. Liam's company was doing so well. He had a new investor coming in from Atlanta. He was thinking about expanding. Then she paused, and the pause was different. It had weight to it. "We need a favor," she said. "Liam needs your credentials." I remember setting down my coffee. "What do you mean, my credentials?" "His books are a mess," she said. Like this was a plumbing problem. Like she was asking me to recommend a contractor. "He needs someone credible to look them over and sign off before this new investor does their due diligence. Just a review. You wouldn't even need to dig deep. Just make it look clean enough." I want to tell you I immediately said no. I want to tell you I saw it for what it was in that first moment and responded with appropriate disgust. But the truth is, I sat there for almost a full minute in silence. Some small broken part of me still hoping there was a version of this conversation that meant she was finally asking for my help. My real help. My expertise, respected on its own terms. "You're asking me to commit fraud," I finally said. "I'm asking you to help your family." "Those aren't different things, Mom." She hung up. And 3 weeks later, the SEC received an anonymous tip about Sterling Oak Capital. I know, because 2 months after that, the federal investigator who knocked on my office door showed me a copy of the complaint. It cited an independent CPA's preliminary review of the company's public filings. It named me as the reviewer. I had never reviewed those filings. I had never touched them. My electronic signature was on a document I had never seen before in my life. The investigator's name was Prentice, calm, professional, carrying a folder that felt like it contained my entire future. He explained that the complaint, cross-referenced with other evidence they were gathering independently, had created what he called a complicated picture involving my professional credentials. "Someone used your CPA license number," he said, "on documents submitted to investors in the past 14 months. 14 months. My brother had been using my name, my license number, my professional reputation, without my knowledge, for 14 months. I sat very still. This is something I've always done when I'm frightened. I go completely still, like a small animal that understands its only defense is to stop moving. "Do you have any documentation of contact with Sterling Oak Capital?" Prentice asked. I thought about my mother's phone call. The one where she'd asked me to sign off on books I'd never seen. The one I hadn't recorded, hadn't documented, hadn't told anyone about. "One phone call," I said. "3 weeks ago, my mother asked me to do exactly what you're describing. I refused." He looked at me, not unkindly, but with the particular careful neutrality of a person who has heard many explanations and believed some of them. "Do you have any record of that call?" I did not. What I had, it turned out, was less than I thought and more than they expected. But I didn't know the second part yet. My firm put me on administrative leave pending the investigation. This was policy. They were careful to explain it wasn't a disciplinary action, just a precaution, said in the same tone people use when they're doing something that hurts you but need to feel good about themselves. I packed a box. I carried it to my car. I sat in the parking deck for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive. I called my father from the car. He answered on the second ring, which surprised me. His tremor had been making phone calls harder. "I know," he said, before I could get past his name. "You know what?" A long pause. The kind that contains entire conversations that never happened. "I know what your mother did," he said. "What Liam did. I found some of the paperwork. I don't move around as well as I used to, but I can still read." I closed my eyes. "Dad, I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry, Avery. I didn't protect you. I should have. I didn't protect any of those people either, and that's going to take me a long time to live with." This is the part I don't talk about much. How I sat in that parking deck and cried for probably 40 minutes. Not about the job, not about the license, not about any of it. Just because my father had said he was sorry. Just because someone in my family had finally said it. He was the ally I brought into this. Not a lawyer, not a colleague. My 63-year-old father with early Parkinson's, who could still read and who, it turned out, had been quietly photographing documents for 2 weeks because he didn't know what else to do. He had 12 photos on his phone. Bank statements with my mother's signature authorizing wire transfers. An email chain between her and Liam discussing the Avery problem, meaning how to handle me once I refused the phone call. An internal document from Sterling Oak that included my CPA license number in a header dated 8 months before she ever called me. They'd been planning this for a while. I was the cleanup. If the SEC came knocking, the paper trail would lead to a licensed CPA who had reviewed the books. That CPA would be me. And by the time anyone looked closely, Liam would have his Atlanta investors' money, and whatever happened to me professionally would be, in my mother's calculation, acceptable collateral. I and my own collateral. I have always been my own collateral. I have always been my own collateral. I called a lawyer that night. Not a family friend, not someone with ties to Charlotte social circles, I found her through a former colleague, a woman named Reyes who had handled a whistleblower case 2 years prior and who came recommended as someone who didn't flinch. She didn't flinch. She listened to everything, looked at the photos my father had sent me, and said, "We're not going to play defense on this." The next 10 weeks were the most methodical of my life. I want to say they were the hardest, but they weren't. The hardest had already happened in the years before, in all the small diminishments I had accepted as normal. This part was actually clarifying. This part had a shape. We documented everything. My phone records showing no contact with Sterling Oak prior to my mother's call. My email archives. A forensic examination of the documents bearing my license number, which showed metadata inconsistencies. They'd been created on a computer I'd never touched, using software I didn't own. My father's photos, authenticated and organized, and the SEC's own parallel investigation, which had been building a case against Sterling Oak entirely independent of me, and was, when we made contact through proper channels, very interested in what we had. There were investors who needed to be protected, real people. The 67-year-old woman, a retired postal worker from Gastonia, a couple in their 70s who had planned to use that money for a memory care facility when the time came. 14 investors total. Combined losses of just over $2.3 million. I cannot fix that. I want to be honest about that. The money, in large part, is gone. Used to fund Liam's lifestyle, repay early investors in the Ponzi structure, cover expenses he'd listed as consulting fees paid to shell accounts. Some of it may be recovered through asset seizure, some of it won't be. That is a grief I carry separately, the way you carry a stone in your shoe, always there, always uncomfortable, never quite gone. What I could do was make sure the people responsible were held responsible, fully, without ankle monitors and suspended sentences, and the particular mercy extended to people who look like upstanding members of a church community. The SEC referral to the Department of Justice took 12 weeks. By the time the indictments came down, we had cooperated with federal investigators in ways that left very little daylight for my mother and brother's defense attorneys to work with. The arraignment was on a Tuesday in March. I did not go. My lawyer went. My father asked if he should go, and I told him to stay home and rest, and he listened, which told me how tired he really was. What my lawyer described to me afterward, my mother in a gray suit, very composed, her attorney speaking quietly beside her. Liam in a blue blazer, looking thin, looking somehow younger and older than I remembered simultaneously. The charges read out: securities fraud, wire fraud, identity fraud for the use of my license, conspiracy. At the mention of identity fraud, my mother apparently turned to her attorney and said something in a low voice. He did not respond. Liam pled not guilty. My mother pled not guilty. Their attorneys are good and they are expensive, paid for with what remained of my parents' equity, I am told, which is a particular kind of poetry. The trial is scheduled. I will testify. I have been told my testimony is significant because I am the only person who can speak to the phone call, to the explicit ask, to the moment my mother said we need a favor and meant we need a crime. My father is cooperating as a witness. This has cost him something I can see in his face and can't quite name. He loves her. After everything, in whatever complicated way a person can love someone who has done what she has done, he loves her. He is testifying anyway. That is its own kind of courage. I got my license back. Cleared, reinstated, with a formal finding that my credentials had been fraudulently used without my knowledge or consent. My firm offered me my position back. I said I'd think about it, and I'm still thinking because the box I carried to my car taught me something about which rooms I belong in and whether I want to walk back into all of them. I'm consulting independently now. I have 3 clients. I work from a home office in a 2-bedroom apartment, where I'm the only person who decides what matters. I make my own coffee. I keep my own hours. I am very, very tired of explaining myself to people who have already made up their minds, and I am very, very done doing it. There is something I want to say about silence, because I've been thinking about it since my father called me from the kitchen where he'd been taking photos of documents for 2 weeks without telling anyone. He could have stayed silent. It would have been easier. He is 63 years old, he is not well, and he could have decided that whatever happened to me was between me and a system he had no power to affect. He didn't. He opened his phone camera and started photographing things he shouldn't have had to photograph, and he called me and said, "I'm sorry." And he is going to sit in a witness box and tell the truth about his wife and his son because he has decided, at 63, with shaking hands, that some things matter more than being comfortable. I don't know how to make a lesson out of all of this that doesn't sound cheap. The truth is complicated, and the grief is real, and the justice, when it comes, will be incomplete. The investors will not be made entirely whole. My father will not stop loving my mother. I will not stop carrying the weight of 31 years of being the name nobody cheered for. But I know who I am. That's not a small thing. It turns out that knowing who you are, really knowing, having tested it, having had it attacked and held on to it anyway, is something no one can use as collateral. They thought I was the quiet one, the forgettable one, the one who would either comply or disappear. I did neither. I kept the records. I told the truth. And when they asked me, in a federal proceeding, to state my name and my profession for the record, I did, clearly, without hesitation, in a room where my credentials had been restored and my name meant exactly what I had spent a decade making it mean. My name is Avery Cole, and I'm the one who does the counting around here. I've thought a lot about what made all of this possible. Not the fraud, that part is easy to explain. Arrogance makes things possible. Entitlement makes things possible. A lifetime of being told you are the miracle, the chosen one, the one worth protecting. That makes a person believe the rules are for everyone else. What I keep turning over is the other side of it. What made the unraveling possible? The answer, when I'm honest with myself, is small and unglamorous. I kept records. I stayed competent. I built something real when no one was watching and no one was clapping. Not because I knew this day was coming. I had no idea this day was coming. But because that's what integrity actually looks like before it's ever tested. It looks like doing the work correctly when it doesn't matter yet. It looks like knowing your numbers. It looks like being the kind of person whose word means something. So that when someone tries to attach your name to a lie, the lie doesn't fit. My mother believed I was the forgettable one. In her calculation, I was useful only as a signature, a credential to borrow, a reputation to drain, a name to take the fall. What she didn't account for was that a name only holds that kind of weight if the person behind it has spent years making it mean something. She wanted to use what I'd built without understanding what it cost to build it. That's the part that stays with me. The people who underestimate you rarely understand what you've actually been doing while they weren't paying attention. My father understood. That's why, at 63 with shaking hands, he opened his phone camera and started photographing things. He didn't do it because he was certain it would work. He did it because he had spent too long staying quiet, and quiet had costs he could finally see clearly. There's a particular kind of courage in that, the kind that doesn't look like courage at all, that looks like an old man standing in a kitchen taking pictures of bank statements. But it changed everything. Every choice has a weight, and his choice to act carried more weight than years of silence ever did. Liam made choices too. So did my mother. And here's the thing about choices made from the belief that you are protected, that consequences are for other people, that love and loyalty can be manufactured on demand, they catch up. Not because the universe is keeping score in any mystical sense, but because reality has a structure. Fraud leaves traces. Signatures can be authenticated. Metadata doesn't lie. The systems that hold financial markets together exist precisely because dishonesty has a pattern, and patterns can be found by someone who knows where to look. I know where to look. That's what I do. What I want to say to anyone who grew up the way I did, quietly, without the cheering, without the college fund, without the miracle label, is this: the absence of applause is not the absence of worth. The work you do in the silence counts. Your competence is yours. Your record is yours. No one can sign their name to what you've actually built inside yourself. I walked into that federal proceeding with nothing except the truth, and 10 years of work that spoke for itself. That was enough. It was more than enough. It always was.